Austin in motion. Into the end zone. Caught! Touchdown, Austin! 1:08 to go. The Tigers with the lead. Go Tigers!
What's up, everybody? Welcome once again to Upset Alert. It is episode number 80 of the Ultimate College Football Podcast, celebrating all 130 teams in FBS. We are here to talk a big weekend of college football this past weekend here. Of course, a lot has happened, right? A whole lot has happened in the last weekend of college football. Everything from a doubleheader of SEC upsets, as the title of the episode suggests, to a big top 5 upset in the ACC, to, of course, one of the biggest games we've had to talk about this year, number 2 versus number 3, Georgia at Alabama. We're going to get into all that and so much more that we have on here. Let's get into a little bit of housekeeping just to kick off the episode, as we normally do, though. Just first and foremost, shout out to all of you guys for checking us out, whether you're listening on podcast services, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, essentially every podcast service that is out there. Shouts to you for checking us out. If you are watching us live on twitch.tv/robotbraineater, thank you as well. Of course, we are live twice a week here on Twitch, twitch.tv/robotbraineater on video, post later to podcast services, normally every Monday and Thursday. So we're recording live today, Monday, about 3:15 p.m. here. So pretty cool stuff. As always, huge shout out to our pals at Buzzsprout. That is the podcast hosting service that we actually use for this podcast. And they have been kind enough to provide us a link to put in our show notes of the podcast. So if any of you all want to get started with your very own podcast, Buzzsprout is the way to go. They get your show listed on every major podcast platform. It's absolutely free to start. As I said, we use Buzzsprout. They've gotten us onto Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Stitcher, Google, everything like that. Well over 1,000 downloads at this point. Certainly would not be able to say that without the guys and gals over at Buzzsprout. Following the link in the show notes lets Buzzsprout know that we sent you, helps support our show, not to mention gets you a $20 Amazon gift card if you do sign up for one of those paid plans. Like I say, you don't have to do that, though. Absolutely free to start. Remember, podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners. Team at Buzzsprout is passionate about helping you succeed, and you can join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. Shouts to Buzzsprout. Again, if you are looking to start a podcast of your own, there is no time to waste. Just use the equipment you've got laying around the house right now. They'll help you get started absolutely for free. That is Buzzsprout. Again, the link will be in the show notes as usual for that. For those of you who aren't already, please do give us a follow on Twitter at UpsetAlertPod on Twitter. There we are retweeting all the big college football news of the world, not to mention sharing our updated rankings. Had a lot of big movers this weekend after, I think, a whole lot of upset wins. Not to mention just some big, I think, statement games in general is the best way to describe it. Some ranked teams proving they deserve to be there, some losing, proving they maybe don't deserve to be there. Hint, hint, you'll definitely see that SEC upset doubleheader, including one whose video highlights are currently playing on the video stream. A couple SEC teams definitely dropped out of our top 25 this week. So moving forward, we are going to get into, of course, the Week 7 wrap-up here and kind of go through those game results, a little bit of analysis on those. I will say my predictions were shoddy this past week, as they pretty much have been for the most part over the last several weeks. Had some hits, had some misses in there for sure. I definitely did not have Kentucky stomping a mud hole in Tennessee. I told you guys UMass plus 28 was easy money against Georgia Southern, obviously. I hope none of you listened to me on that one, as Georgia Southern absolutely embarrassed the Minutemen. On that note, I will say, in terms of our updated rankings, if you want to check those out on Twitter at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter, we do have a new worst team in college football this week because I was so blown away by how bad UMass was in that game against Georgia Southern. I know they've only played one game, whereas Louisiana Monroe has played several and lost them all. I do think UMass looked as bad as anybody has looked all season long in that football game. So shouts to UMass. You are number 127 out of 127 this week. There is, of course, going to be some movement at the top in those rankings as well. So without further ado, we are going to get right into this Week 7 wrap-up. Let's get into this schedule, starting with our first Wednesday night game of the year, and it did not disappoint. This was a pretty darn good football game on a Wednesday night this past week. We had a Sun Belt showdown of undefeated teams. Coastal Carolina at Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, who were coming into this game at number 21 in the country. These were, as I said, two undefeated teams. We've seen Coastal Carolina with a win over Kansas to this point in the season. Of course, they had a blowout win over Arkansas State. Louisiana came into this game with the hype of having beaten Iowa State earlier in the season, but played some close games against definitely lesser teams in Georgia State and Georgia Southern already this year. Louisiana upset in this game. Coastal Carolina 30-27 came out on top. You have to call it like it is at this point. The Chanticleers are the team to beat in the Sun Belt at this point, and if you had told me I'd be saying that at this point in the season, I'd have definitely called you crazy. I picked this team to go 3-9 back when we did our preseason predictions. Simply has not been the case. Coastal Carolina looks like the real deal. I thought maybe this was the game where they finally got exposed a little bit. It simply did not happen. This Coastal Carolina team looks for real. They are really the team to beat at this point in the Sun Belt Conference. So moving right along, Thursday, October the 15th, another Sun Belt matchup here, Georgia State at Arkansas State. Shouts to Georgia State. They did keep it a little closer than I expected them to. This was a crazy high-scoring game, 59-52. Arkansas State picking up the win in that one. I will say my Arkansas State to the Sun Belt Conference Championship game predictions still in play here. They really just have one conference loss at this point. But, you got to give it to Georgia State for keeping it close in this football game. Arkansas State, though, still very much alive in the Sun Belt Conference Championship discussion. We had Friday night a doubleheader, number 14 BYU at Houston. I thought for a while my pick on this one was gonna be garbage. I told you guys on my prediction show I thought BYU minus the points there. I believe it was about a 3.5 point spread. I thought they were easy money. Looked for a while like that was not going to be the case. Houston led in this game at times. They kept it very close for almost the entire game, but BYU just put the pedal to the metal late in the fourth quarter and pulled away to make this one look worse than it was. Zach Wilson is the real deal. I tweeted this out on the Twitter account, I believe Friday night. Zach Wilson is a legit Heisman Trophy contender. He is right up there in probably the top 5 Heisman contenders right now. Of course, you're going to talk about Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, both at Clemson. You're going to talk about Mac Jones probably at Alabama, and Najee Harris for that matter as well at Alabama as Heisman Trophy contenders. Lots of guys that are kind of getting into that discussion early, and of course, as the Big Ten joins, we'll probably be talking a lot about Justin Fields as well at Ohio State. But man, Zach Wilson's right there in that conversation. This dude is good. This dude is really good. We had SMU on Friday night as well. Number 17 SMU, that is, at Tulane. This one closer than I expected it to be. Actually went to overtime before Shane Buechele led those Mustangs to an overtime victory, 37-34. SMU picking up the win over Tulane there. So shouts to SMU. They look good. They look really good. Of course, they own a win over Memphis already this season, which looks even more impressive now with Memphis having beaten UCF this week. Spoilers. We'll get to that in just a little bit here. So as usual, just the way I am reading these directly off the ESPN website, so it is going to kind of sort these games by rankings. So we'll get kind of some of the big games out of the way here and work our way down. So the Saturday slate, we had number 1 Clemson at Georgia Tech. This was, I believe I read a stat earlier, one of the worst loss, or the worst loss that Georgia Tech has suffered since the late 1800s. That is absolutely bonkers. To think that this Georgia Tech team has actually had good moments this season seems almost impossible to believe. Seeing that they had a really comfortable win over Louisville, seeing that they had a somewhat comfortable win, I suppose, over Florida State earlier this season, it just seems so out of reach right now because this Clemson team is so dominant, and they had not really had a dominant performance until that game against Miami last week. But now I think that they've got that complete game under their belts. They look like a complete team. One takeaway you do get here is Trevor Lawrence throws his first interception in, I believe, it was something like between 300 and 400 pass attempts, which is just outrageous. One of the longest streaks in college football history without an interception. He does throw a pick in this game, but he also throws for over 400 yards passing, 5 touchdowns. Pretty much all of that, by the way, came in the first half because then, of course, Clemson just took their foot off the gas a little bit. Even so, they had a punter in at quarterback at one point. They still dropped 73 on the Yellow Jackets in Atlanta. Does not feel good, I imagine, to be a Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets fan. By the way, just a bad week for Georgia sports. We will get on to a little bit more detail of that in just a moment, but you guys know I am from Georgia. I'm a Georgia Bulldog. I'm an Atlanta Braves fan. It was a bad week. Man, the Atlanta Braves blowing a 3-1 National League Championship Series lead to the Dodgers hurts, and the next game for me personally hurt as well. We'll get right into it. Number 3 Georgia at number 2 Alabama. What can you say here other than this was yet another Georgia-Alabama game? It was not as exciting as the 2017 National Championship game or the 2018 SEC Championship game. It wasn't as good of a game start to finish as either of those, but the first half was great. Georgia came out swinging in this game. They put some points on the board early. They either led or tied for pretty much the entire first half. They get up 24-17. Alabama tacks on a last-minute field goal. They got the ball back with about, I believe it's 20-something, 30-something seconds there, and stole some points at the end, getting a field goal before halftime to generate some momentum. 24-20 Georgia going into the second half, and Georgia getting the ball. Looks pretty good for the Dogs, right? Absolutely not. If you've seen these Georgia-Alabama games over the last few years, you know that the Dogs up at the half is big trouble. This year, it went worse in the second half than it has in the past. Stetson Bennett, who had one tip ball for an interception in the first half, throws 2 more picks in the second half. This Alabama defense had their best performance of the season thus far overall, but especially in the second half. They just look like a completely different team than they have at any point thus far this season. And as far as their offense goes, you know, if you've seen any Alabama football over the last few seasons, what this offense is capable of. Mac Jones was out there dropping dimes to these Alabama wide receivers. Georgia's secondary was getting burned left and right. Late in the game, Najee Harris started to gash them for some big runs as well. It just did not go well. Georgia got shut out in the second half. Mac Jones throws for north of 400 yards on the day. It's 41-24 Alabama for your final, so 21-0 in that second half. Crimson Tide's advantage. It is going to be hard to win a football game if you get shut out in the second half and turn the ball over 3 times against this Alabama team. Louisville at number 4, Notre Dame. Notre Dame wins a close one here. This is kind of starting to feel a little bit like 2012 Notre Dame to me. They are a good team. I think they are a legitimate top 10 team. I don't know if number 4 is legit, but I don't know how many teams you're realistically putting ahead of them right now because they are still undefeated. This has been a very good football team. They have definitely won some close ones. They underperformed, I would say, against Florida State a couple of weeks ago. Maybe woke that Florida State team up. They win a really close one here as well. So 12-7, just a 5-point kind of ugly grinded out win against the Louisville team that, again, lost by like 3 scores to Georgia Tech. So this is kind of an ugly win for Notre Dame once again. Moving forward, obviously, this kind of effort is not going to be good enough to beat Clemson, who they do play on the regular season schedule, and will probably, unless they stumble along the way in the regular season, will probably meet up with Clemson again in the ACC championship game this year. So Notre Dame, you get another win, but you gotta do better than that in the toughest games of your season that are coming up soon. Number 5, North Carolina at Florida State. This was the biggest upset of the weekend, no question. Florida State has looked awful in every game except that game last week against Notre Dame. They had an awful performance where they trailed Jacksonville State out of the FCS for the majority of the game. They had awful performances early on in their conference schedule against teams like Georgia Tech. This Florida State team has looked really bad. Remember, they got blown out by Miami, too, early in the year. This team really outplayed North Carolina. They started this game off really hot. I believe it was 24-0 at one point, Florida State's advantage. North Carolina rallies back late in the game to make it close, but Florida State hangs on for the win. I have said every single week on this podcast, I have said that North Carolina is overrated. Number 5, North Carolina, was an absolutely ridiculous concept that pretty much is entirely invented by kind of this media narrative that North Carolina is this great football team. They are a good football team. I am a firm believer they're a top 25, maybe top 20 or even 15 team potentially is their cap, I would say, their ceiling. But this is not a top 10 team. They are certainly not a top 5 team, and I think you saw that get exposed a little bit this Saturday against the Seminoles. So shouts to Florida State. They were probably our biggest jump up this weekend in terms of the performance that they put on this weekend. I saw a lot out of that Florida State team this weekend and last weekend that we have been waiting to see from them for quite some time. I really like Coach Mike Norvell at Florida State. I think he's a great football coach. I think it's going to continue to take some time for this team to grow. They definitely have some glaring holes in their team right now, but they're still growing. They're still growing, but they are winning now. They have a couple wins on the schedule now, so they I guess feel a little more confident going forward into their kind of meat of their ACC schedule. So hopefully Florida State, for their sake, can get things turned around. If you guys recall, if you've been listening to the show for a while, I picked them to go like 9-3 in the preseason. I don't see them getting to that point. To an 8 or 9 win season this year. Certainly not with a game missing off the schedule at this point anyway. But Florida State doesn't look too bad right now, and I do think this is a team that could be good in the way that Tennessee was coming down the stretch last year. Maybe an awful start type of thing, and maybe they recover nicely in the second half of the season. Moving right along, we had Texas A&M. This team is kind of the opposite of that Florida State story, right? I was pretty low on Texas A&M coming into the year. I had them at 5-5 in the 10-game SEC schedule. They were playing at Mississippi State this week, which I think we pretty much all would have agreed upon before this game that Texas A&M would win this one. Not a really sexy win. It's 28-14 for Texas A&M, but the important thing is coming off that big emotional win against Florida last week, they keep the foot on the gas and keep another win on the schedule. It is a grind every single week in the SEC. I know Mississippi State has looked awful over the last few weeks, but Texas A&M comes out with the win here. That is all that matters. They are going forward possibly going to be a threat for some teams. I do still think they have a lot of issues. I don't have a ton of faith right now in Jimbo Fisher as a head coach, but I have to say he outcoached Dan Mullen on that day last week, certainly, and Texas A&M proved against Florida they do have the capability of upsetting just about anyone in the country, because Florida definitely is a legitimate top 10 football team this year. We had Pitt at number 13, Miami. Miami picks up another win, rather. It's 31-19 in that one. Miami continues to look good. Pitt maybe falling out of kind of what was before a fringe top 25 team, probably falling more into the 40s range right now in terms of a ranking. We've got number 15, Auburn at South Carolina. South Carolina pulls one of the bigger upsets outside of that Florida State game. This was probably the biggest upset of the week, just in terms of where those teams likely sat in overall rankings. South Carolina wins 30-22. We have to say, in these next two games, and I'll go ahead and include the result from the next one, just so we can kind of discuss these two games together. This is the SEC upset doubleheader that is in the title of the episode. Kentucky went to Tennessee and blew them out of the water. Number 18, Tennessee, losing 34-7 against Kentucky. There's a few things to note here. Side by side, the numbers are going to look a little different here. But Jarrett Garantano on Saturday for Tennessee and Bo Nix for Auburn on Saturday, equally bad. They were both awful in this football game. Jarrett Garantano throws a couple picks. Bo Nix throws 3 picks, I believe, in this game. Both of Jarrett Garantano's, actually, if I recall, were pick sixes as well. The backup comes in for a drive, throws one too. It's just a rough quarterback performance by both of these teams. Tennessee really got blown out by Kentucky in this football game. They just did not even look like they belonged on the same field. It was 4 quarters, just Kentucky all over them. Defense was all over the field, and offense for Tennessee unable to get anything done at all. They run the ball, I guess, to some mild success. Eric Gray ran north of the century mark in this game. But this is the more impressive thing for me, I think, about that Kentucky win. They did all of that. They put 34 points on the board, mostly just through great defense, because Terry Wilson, the quarterback, is the leading passer in this game with 101 yards. Absolutely unheard of in this day and age of college football for the leading passer on the winning team to throw for just 100 yards. And your leading rusher in the game is from Tennessee at 128 yards. So Kentucky did not have any one guy really standing out on offense, showing out and having a big day. They just won this game with great defense and grit, really. And then the South Carolina game, again, Auburn did South Carolina a lot of favors. Bo Nix turned the ball over a lot. He threw for a lot more yards, nearly 300 passing yards on the day. Did get into the end zone as well in the air. But Bo Nix had an awful day in terms of turning the football over. I have to say, really the question on Saturday, and it was kind of funny timing. Somebody posted a tweet that I saw on our Upset Alert Pod Twitter account. They said, "What do you think about Bo Nix as a football player?" And I quote retweeted and I said, not a good football player. And about 20 seconds later, he threw a pick six. And it was like, I don't know. It's just bad quarterback play. Looking at Bo Nix this past Saturday, looking at Bo Nix against Georgia in that game, looking at Bo Nix against Arkansas. I mean, the past 3 weeks, and you could really say just about the same thing about Jarrett Garantano. Looking at both of those quarterbacks' performances over the last couple of weeks, I just can't imagine that the other option looks that bad. Right? Whoever the other option is at quarterback for those teams, they need to at least give them some kind of consideration, because I understand that those guys have established their names as recognizable names in the SEC, but that doesn't necessarily mean a good thing. Jarrett Garantano is just throwing picks left and right. Bo Nix is throwing picks left and right. Bo Nix is out there making terrible decisions as well, by the way. Bad clock management decisions. Bad decisions trying to throw a ball away too late that really cost Auburn that football game. Tennessee got flat out ran off the field by Kentucky, but Auburn had a chance to get one final drive and try to tie that football game up. They had a couple of chances really to try to keep that game close, and they gave them away. They really gave them away through just poor decision making. And that's really my takeaway in both of these two games is Auburn and Tennessee. You need to start at least exploring some other options at quarterback, or it may not be looking so good for Gus Malzahn and Jeremy Pruitt's job security coming forward. Jeremy Pruitt may be a little more secure just because I think he's a little earlier in his tenure there. But Gus Malzahn at Auburn, what are you even doing at this point? I mean, not only do Auburn and Tennessee not look like top 25 teams in these games, they don't look like top 50 teams in these games. They look awful. But I have ranted far enough. I don't want to pile on Vols fans and War Eagle there. I don't want to pile on too bad there. So let's move on. We got some ACC football to talk here. Boston College at number 23, Virginia Tech. VT wins 40-14. Business as usual here. I think this was about what I expected in this game, but BC is not a bad team. At least they haven't looked like one to this point in the season. So shouts to the Hokies for picking up a win there. That's a solid win. I do think they could be a legit top 25 team. We have Navy at East Carolina. Navy picks up a close one, 27-23 over a bad East Carolina team. Navy has not looked great at times this year, but hey, they pick up the win, moving in the right direction at least. Texas State and South Alabama. South Alabama, this one I do recall I picked right, 30-20 for South Alabama, so shouts to the Jags there. They are kind of maybe establishing themselves to be at least in that middle tier in the Sun Belt. Texas State probably in that bottom tier, right where we thought they would be for the most part in the preseason. South Florida at Temple. Temple picks up the win 39-37, so a close football game here. Not two great teams or anything like that. South Florida I actually applaud because I do think Temple is a significantly better team than them here, if not a great football team. I do applaud South Florida for keeping this one close against the better team. Liberty at Syracuse. This is one we're going to take a minute on here. Liberty wins 38-21. The Liberty Flames still undefeated to this point in the season. Syracuse is not a good football team, right? They have been bad this year. Bad to awful, I think is how you would describe them. They're really their only highlight, that win against Georgia Tech. Outside of that, they have been beat up left and right, and this game, no exception. I know it's a 17-point margin, but Liberty dominated this game for most of the time. The Flames, you got to give credit where credit's due. Head coach Hugh Freeze, I know he's had some issues with using the company phone for some, shall we say, personal business in the past. But this is a guy who can coach a football team. I think he's going to work his way back into a Power 5 coaching job at some point. or at least maybe an upper tier group of 5 coaching job. I just think somebody is going to give him a look as a head coach in the very near future, take that chance on him again at the Power 5 level. This is just, it's a good football team, right? You have to call it like it is at this point. Liberty is significantly better than I expected them to be at this point in the season. Now, I will say there's a little bit of overhype now after they beat Syracuse this week because it is a road win against a Power 5 football team. Liberty, let's kind of water it down, maybe here is the best word. Let's water down the hype just a little bit and say that Liberty has had some kind of ugly wins over some not great teams this year, in addition to some more impressive wins like maybe this road win against Syracuse. I do think this is a good football team at Liberty. I'm not ready quite yet to call them a top 25 team. I will be ready to do that if they beat Southern Miss this coming week, because despite their performance thus far this year, I do think Southern Miss is still a good and talented football team. If Liberty beats them this coming week, I think Liberty is probably a top 25 team. If Southern Miss beats Liberty this week, that also probably makes them seem more legitimate in Southern Miss, that is. So that's actually an interesting game that we'll spend a little time talking about when we get into our prediction show on Thursday. So we'll hold off on that for now. For now, we'll just say Liberty. That is a quality football game right there. That is a good win against Syracuse. Give credit where credit's due. As we scroll down a little here, Kansas at West Virginia. I joked that what does it say about the Big 12 slate for the week, that Kansas was in the noon Fox game. That's supposed to be their Big 12 game of the week, at least until the Big 10 comes along, right, and steals their time slot. And it's funny that I said that because I almost thought I was going to have to eat my words because Kansas started off hot in this game. They led by a couple scores early. West Virginia, of course, rallies back and beats them. Kansas continues to be terrible at football. They look like a bottom 10 team in FBS, really. West Virginia looks okay, I think is the best way you can describe them here. They get the win, but they are not a great football team really either. They're probably lower middle tier in the Big 12. We had Army at UTSA. This is one I definitely swung and missed on. I picked UTSA to pull the upset here. They did not. Not a huge win for Army, but a comfortable win, I would say. 28-16. They really controlled it the whole game for the most part. So shouts to Army. They are not a team that really blows people out because of what their offense is, running that triple option, moving so slow, eating clock. So they pick up the win here. That's really what they do. 28-16 type of games, maybe 2 touchdown wins is about all you can really expect from the Black Knights. But shout to Army. They get another win. Western Kentucky at UAB. UAB is one of my preseason picks that I was most confident in, and they are making me look smart. I picked this team to win Conference USA this year. I think I picked them to go 11-1, I believe, when we did the full 12-game schedule. Of course, they probably won't play 12 this year exactly, or they'll try at least, but they are only lost to Miami thus far, which is the one team on the schedule that I picked them to lose to. They pick up the win here over Western Kentucky, who has certainly been a little disappointing this year. Western Kentucky just puts up 14. Preseason, I would have thought this would have been the best games of the year in Conference USA. Not so much. UAB wins 37-14 there. We had Duke at NC State. NC State quietly building up a nice season. They've just lost one game to this point, and they get this nice win over Duke, 31-20. NC State has wins over Pitt at this point. They've got wins over a couple of decent football teams. So shouts to the Wolfpack. They are looking pretty good. They're kind of a fringe top 25 team. I know some folks do have them in their top 25 this week. I'm not quite there, but I'm close to pulling the trigger on that. I know especially folks who have been ranking Just the teams that are playing, a lot of them have NC State in their top 25 this week. We've got Memphis hosting UCF. This was an absolute shootout. First and foremost, if you're watching on video and you can see these stat lines on here with me, this is not a typo. Dylan Gabriel, UCF's quarterback, threw for 601 yards in this game. The total yardage between these two teams, when they popped up those stats while I was watching this game live, I had to do a double take. These teams were putting up like over 700 yards of total offense each. It was absolutely a crazy, crazy game, back and forth. Memphis gets the late score to go up 50-49 in this one. UCF had a chance at a game-winning field goal as time expired. Well, not quite as time expired, I suppose. About 20 seconds left in the game. They missed. Needless to say, they missed that game-winning field goal try with very little time left. Memphis picks up a huge, huge conference win. Like I said, but coming into this game, it wasn't necessarily an elimination game from the American Athletic Conference Championship game for Memphis, but it probably was for UCF. They had already lost to Tulsa in conference. They now lose to Memphis as well. Memphis has lost just to SMU to this point. So it really felt like both teams needed the win, to be honest here. Memphis does pick up the win over UCF 50-49. Just a crazy, crazy game. You can pretty much, not completely, but you can pretty much at this point, I think, write UCF off in that AAC championship game. Memphis, though, is here to stay, at least for now. SMU will have something to say about that. Obviously, they've already got the win over Memphis, so they have some tough games still remaining on their schedule. And it should be interesting. It should be really interesting. Cincinnati, of course, will have something to say about it as well. So we will see going down the stretch. But Memphis in this game, to me, because I do still think UCF is a good team despite the loss to Tulsa, I think Memphis looks like a top 25 team right now, as do Cincinnati and SMU. That is a good conference in the American Athletic Conference. It's very top-heavy, but those four teams at the top, 4 or 5 teams at the top, really, you could say, all looking very good. So moving forward here, we got Ole Miss at Arkansas. This is another one where I definitely am eating crow. I picked Ole Miss in this football game. I was questioning why the spread was so low. I think it was Ole Miss -3 in this game. I definitely am eating crow on this one. Arkansas really just showed up. I didn't think there was any chance in the world that Arkansas held Ole Miss below 35, and I think that was what I said I think they needed to do to win this football game. Not only do they do that, they hold Ole Miss to just 21 in the game. The Hogs come out with the win 33-21. It's hard to say, right? We have seen Matt Corral and this Ole Miss offense be so explosive all season long. They just simply did not have that on this day. So it is really fascinating. It's hard to explain, hard to rationalize, but Arkansas just gets it done. And I have to say, head coach Sam Pittman, first year ever as a head coach, he has the Hogs looking better than I thought they could have possibly looked at this point in the season. I thought he needed at least 2, maybe 3 years to really get that football program where he needed it to be to even compete, to go like 500 in the conference. Well, guess what? It's his first year. And right now, I know they still got a lot of tough games to play. Right now, they're 500 in the conference. They're 2-2. So you got to shout out Arkansas for looking good to this point in the season. Moving right along, we've got Eastern Kentucky at Troy. Troy needed a game-winning field goal to win this one, 31-29. So Eastern Kentucky actually threatened the upset here. The FCS team playing against the Sun Belt team. You have to give credit to Troy for finding way to, grind out the win here late against Eastern Kentucky, but this was an ugly win to be sure for the Trojans. So shout to Troy for finding a way to win this one. Moving right along, like I said, we also had what I thought was easy money, UMass against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern was a 31-point favorite, I believe, by kickoff time in this football game. So Georgia Southern, of course, did live up to those expectations. I didn't expect them to, but Georgia Southern comes out 41-0 over UMass. That is why I have thus given UMass the title of the worst team in college football now to this point. So the new 127 out of 127. We'll see if they continue to earn that title as the next few weeks go on, or will Louisiana Monroe maybe get back in that spot. We have Virginia at Wake Forest. Wake Forest picks up the win here, 40-23. I guess not particularly shocking here. I did pick Virginia to win the game, so a little bit surprised, but shouts to Wake Forest. They looked good in this game. Dropping 40 was the kind of offense that I expected in the preseason from Wake Forest when we thought Sage Surratt would be there. Knowing that he's not there now, it's impressive to see these guys go to work in place of what was probably the best wide receiver in college football coming into the preseason that they had opt out before the season actually began. North Texas at Middle Tennessee. This one I kind of predicted would be a little bit of an ugly game, or just maybe not quite an exciting game. Both these teams have looked pretty bad at times this year. North Texas does get the win 52-35, as I thought they might. Middle Tennessee is right down there as well with some of the worst teams in college football so far this year. North Texas not too far ahead of them, but you do give credit there for picking up the win for the Mean Green. Marshall at Louisiana Tech also thrown in here at the last game of the week. Marshall does pick up the win 35-17. The Thundering Herd also jumping into our top 25 this week, as well as I think they are in the AP and coaches polls now in the top 25. Thundering Herd looking like a legit top 25 team right now. They are still undefeated, and they get a 3-score win here over a Louisiana Tech team that is nothing to sneeze at in the Conference USA division there. Just a quick kind of roundup, a few postponed games from this past weekend. So some of these already have new dates, some of them not yet to this point. We did miss out on number 7 Oklahoma State at Baylor, number 8 Cincinnati at Tulsa, LSU at number 10 Florida, Southern Miss at UTEP, Vandy at Missouri, and Florida International at Charlotte. So all those games from this past week were postponed. Again, some of those we're still waiting on dates. There has been a shuffling around of certain games in the SEC already. So normally you're used to seeing Georgia and Florida both get that bye week before the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. That is not happening this year. They're both getting, or at least Georgia, for example, is getting a bye week this coming week, then playing Kentucky, then Florida immediately after. So a little bit of a different vibe there, I guess, just not getting the bye week before. But yeah, that's about going to wrap up our Week 7 wrap-up, game by game, kind of in review there, essentially. And what we'll do is just take a quick peek at a couple of storylines going on. I did just retweet this one while the show was going on our Twitter account at Upset Alert Pod. Brett McMurphy, in regards to the Mid-American Conference, tweeted out, MACtion announces TV schedule. The first 19 MAC games between November 4th and 19th will all be played on weekdays, then moving to Saturdays on November the 28th. Just thought that was kind of interesting, just for the fact that we're getting a lot of weekday football. You guys know I'm all for that. The off time slots, the off days, I guess. Give me more football where we normally don't get any. Thank you guys again so much for listening, though. We're just wrapping up for episode 80 of Upset Alert. Again, we're live here on twitch.tv/robotbraineater, at Upset Alert Pod on Twitter. If you do find us on your podcast services, please take the time to subscribe. Give us that 5-star review. Helps us get more eyeballs and more ears on the podcast. Thank you again for listening. Until Thursday, we will see you later.